Reverse by Black K. Cat. Chapter 69. Oscillation. There are screams coming from deeper in the village, and Utakata is starting to doubt that Roshi and Han will make it to Kurama in any reasonable amount of time. Understandable, given that he can't either, but frustrating! Horrifying just a little somewhere deep down inside him where he can allow himself to focus on such things. A kunai with a tag skims past his head as he rolls to his feet, but Utakata doesn't flinch, brings his pipe to his lips, and exhales, folding chakra into his breath. Bubbles bloom, sweeping out to swallow the cloud of poison gas that pours from the puppet's mouth, and then rising. In the same moment, Utakata dives, dodging another flight of kunai. No time for panic, even though there's an instinct to give into it. No time for thoughts beyond the most indirect for the school behind him, and what will happen if he loses control of this fight. He can't afford to let it spill over, can't risk an entire academy with most of Kana Ashinobi children within. It's less altruism and more practicality, no matter how much Utakata cares for those inside, and it still leaves him on the defensive, biding his time as he tries to find an opening. Just one puppet rather than the hundreds they dealt with in the past, but this one is stronger with more chakra than just Sasori's, and the ground shifts just slightly. With a curse that would make Master Harusame cuff him in the head, Utakata leaps as spikes of metal burst from the earth beneath him, summons a bubble, and redirects off of it, landing lightly on the far side of Sasori and calling a sweep of bubbles down to swarm the puppeteer. Sasori plants his feet, a wall of metal erupting in front of him, and even the detonation of 3 of Utakata's explosive bubbles, one after the other, doesn't manage to dent it. "You won't defeat me," Sasori said, and it's little consolation that he sounds less bored now than he did at the beginning of their fight. "This is my strongest puppet. In life he was the greatest of Suna's Kazekage, and now he is my favorite piece of art. True art that will linger long into the future." Kurama had warned them about Sasori and his human puppets back in Kiri before he left to destroy the Akatsuki base. Utakata had listened, of course, had memorized abilities and weaknesses because he was the one left with the younger children, a final defense. Even so, there's a whole world of difference between secondhand knowledge and the immediate chilling realization that he's fighting an animated corpse, suspended on puppet strings, organs ripped out to make room for weaponry, and chakra systems carefully preserved. People might laugh at a shinobi using bubbles to fight, but at least Utakata's jutsu don't rely on dead bodies! Utakata grits his teeth. There are traces of Sasori's poison in the air, and he can feel his chakra rising, shoving more force into his healing in order to keep up. His bubbles are mostly keeping it contained, but if he's knocked out, they'll burst. Between the poison and the iron sand, which has its own dose of poison in every microscopic grain, their battlefield is turning into a desolate killing ground, and that's not a happy thought with children so close. He takes a careful breath, makes it measured and calm and even, and straightens. Another sweep of bubbles curls around him, then scatters itself across the field between them, traps lying in wait. Sasori eyes them narrowly, but before he can make a move to trigger them, Utakata steps forward. "You're fortunate," he says, and it's soft, but it still carries. When Sasori's expression shades towards incomprehension, Utakata smiles wryly. "I heard that your parents were killed, and you have my condolences, but at least you knew they loved you." Confusion is quickly darkening into hostility. "Don't say useless things." Sasori snaps. A faint twitch of his fingers brings the third Kazekage lurching back up, bright iron sand rising to swirl around him in a dark cloud. "I don't think it's useless," Utakata counters politely. Inwardly, he reaches for his biju, trying to keep a stranglehold on his chakra to keep from giving the game away. "I grew up with a father, but I think I was always a weapon to him rather than a son. I suppose I'll never truly know, but at least you did." "Daddy and Mommy is just like you wouldn't believe," was Kurama's gruff assessment of Sasori. "I don't know how much good it will do you to make him lose his temper, but there's no harm in trying if you've got Jinchuriki healing, I guess." Utakata usually prefers more elegant solutions to his problems, but he's short on options and even shorter on time, so mental manipulation it is. Lurking just beneath the surface, Saiken bubbles in eager agreement, and Utakata can feel the biju's power rise like a tide through his veins. He takes a breath and lets it out, and it steams faintly in the cool air. Another, and this time the wave of chakra crashes through him, spreading to every limb and washing across his skin. Containing is like trying to hold back the ocean, but Utakata clamps down on his will, forces himself to steady, and doesn't bother wishing he had more practice using Saiken's chakra. It's too late for that. Sasori makes a faint scoffing sound and says bitingly, "Trying to use those games won't have any effect. My heart is just like this body. a piece of machinery and nothing more. If you were, you wouldn't need to bother saying that. Utakata takes a step, judging distance and how long the transformation will take, and pauses as close as he can risk coming. Now all he needs is a split second of distraction on Sasori's part. What is it like to have the memory of their love and waste it on actions like this? Something shifts at the very edge of his vision. There's a pause, tense and careful, and then Sasori's expression shifts into a small, sly smile, and he lifts his hands. For an instant, the chakra threads shimmer into visibility before they vanish again, like the ripple of trapped lightning. I've told you already that won't work on me, he says, and there's dark amusement in his voice. My parents are dead, but I'm alive, and I have no plans to die. Akatsuki allows me the freedom to build my puppets and indulge in my art, and no child will convince me to do otherwise. Well, it was worth a try, Utakata supposes. He doesn't know enough about Sasori to say anything that will make him falter, and there's no use dragging things out and putting him at a disadvantage. All right, Utakata says, keeping his tone polite. There's no need to be rude, not yet. He twists his pipe through his fingers, then brings it to his lips again. I'm sorry we can't work this out. You're a strong opponent, and it's a shame I have to kill you. Sasori's eyes narrow, and the Kazekage puppet moves in a blur of poisoned sand sweeping up in a wave. Instantly, Utakata throws himself forward, flipping over the spikes, and breathes out bubbles filled with ink. They spiral through the air at ample shattering on spikes of iron sand, but a flicker of chakra to drive their rest on sends them flying directly at Sasori. The Kazekage catches them before they can hit, absorbs the explosion without flinching, even as the ink-dark acid eats through his robes. A slew of needles forces Utakata down, leaping out of their path as they slam into the ground, but there are too many to close together. He staggers a step, plants his feet, and summons another bubble around himself to block them, and as it blooms into existence, he realizes his mistake! The burst of iron sand swarms up from the ground, slicing through his robes to the skin beneath. Instantly, the wounds begin to sear, and the pain is sudden and crippling enough to drive Utakata to his knees, a hoarse sound ripped from his throat despite the way his lungs have seized. He grasps desperately for control as his barrier shatters, trying to keep the poison-filled bubbles above from bursting, but his body jerks like it's about to convulse, and the taste of metal floods his mouth. Gagging, he tries to stagger back to his feet to keep from coughing, but it hurts! It hurts more than anything he can ever remember, even when they first sealed Seiken into him. Utakata! Seiken cries, sounding frantic. Utakata, stop fighting it! It's metals and poisons, and I'm trying to get rid of it! Metals. Metal in the poison, which makes sense given Sasori's obsession with the Kazekage. That's likely where he got the idea in the first place. Utakata lets his knees fold again, hits the ground hard, and chokes up the bitter, acidic tang that splatters black and viscous from his mouth. His vision swims, and even though his body feels unnaturally hot, he can feel the seep of blood from far too much of his skin to be anywhere close to healthy. My apologies for making you wait, Sasori says from somewhere above him. I decided to end this quickly and complete my mission. In several years you might have made an interesting opponent and a valuable addition to my collection. A pause, like he's considering, and then a thoughtful sound. Perhaps once Madara finishes with you, I will be allowed to repurpose your body. Seiken, Utakata thinks, and the power is still there, still waiting, but he's too slow at using it, unpracticed. All of Sasori's attention is on them, and there's no opening. I know, the slug answers, fluttery with worry and tension. I know, but we can... A shadow falls across him, and a familiar voice, trembling ever so faintly, warns, Don't even think about it! Something drops to the ground, and Utakata has just enough time to catch sight of a strip of paper marked with seals before it starts to glow. Iruka flashes through hand size with startling deafness and cries, Fupaku Hojin! The seals crackle to life, brilliant gold even in the morning sun, and Sasori makes a sound of outrage, already fighting the barriers old. Utakata knows those seals, knows this formation, and he's not about to question his luck. He grabs for Seiken's power and drags it to the surface, staggering upright with an effort, and this change is no more pleasant than the poison! The chakra is corrosive and unstoppable, sweeping over him, and he cries out as he staggers, but... Pale blue light spreads over his body, condenses and firms into flesh, and Utakata takes a mental step back as Seiken slides into place in his stead. There's a sensation like a gentle fall, even as Saiken calls up a flood of chakra and he takes a step into a quiet clearing, empty and still. With a low groan, Utakata slumps against the bole of a massive tree, just barely hanging onto the bark to stay on his feet, and lets his focus shift sideways until he can see what's happening outside the mental plane. His head is spinning, and he still hurts all over, but there's a bubble in his chest that's pure success and joy. It may have been a last desperate measure, but it worked! And now Saiken won't have to be constrained by Utakata's limits. Utakata spent far too much time closing his ears and strangling his power under Master Haresame's direction, and while he's grateful to the man for his jutsu, for his knowledge of medicines and seals, that reserve is his greatest weakness right now. Saiken, though, is managing just fine. Relieved, Utakata lets himself slip all the way to the ground, legs giving out under him. Saiken can hold his bubble jutsu without struggle, tied into Utakata's chakra system as he is, and one shinobi, no matter how powerful, will hardly be trouble for Obito. He coughs, tasting metal again, and grimaces even as he lets his head fall to rest against the tree. Blood slides down the side of his face, and when he goes to brush it away, his vision swims, his awareness of the outside world fading. For a moment he tries to fight the pull of darkness, the heavy immobility of his limbs, but Saiken sends a wave of cool, soothing chakra washing over him, edged with reassurance. All Utakata can manage is a flicker of thankfulness before he lets his eyes slip shut. Trust, he thinks. It's the strangest thing in the world to give so easily to a monster he had spent his entire childhood being taught to fear. But Utakata is tired of not trusting, tired of being afraid of himself. He throws open all restraints on his chakra, lets Saiken have every bit of it, and gives up all control, and it feels a little as if all of his strings have finally been cut. Kurama fucking hates Kamui! And Obito too, while he's on the subject! With a furious snarl, he wrenches the kunai out of his shoulder, feels the gaping lack where his chakra should be rising to heal the wound, and staggers a step. The water sloshes around his knees, retreating as Kisame releases his jutsu, but that's hardly a relief given the situation. Fucking bastard! He snarls at the blank white mask that turns towards him, though the man behind it is unmoving. Kisame laughs, deep and rumbling and incredibly amused, and looks Obito over with a grin. Hey, boss. Seems you're feeling better. Obito raises a hand, flexing his fingers, and tips his head, faintly mocking. You aren't the only one who can use seals, he says to Kurama, and there's a thread of cool interest in his tone. Though that seal is meant to contain a Biju, I'm surprised you're still breathing. That's interesting. A chill slides down Kurama's spine, because if there's one person in the world he doesn't want to know what he is, it's Obito. He doesn't try to answer, just snarls and hurls himself forward to slash at the Uchiha with his claws, but he doesn't even score claws. Obito shifts into intangibility, and it's an unpleasant reminder that even Minato wasn't consistently able to hit him despite using the eration. It's not enough to deter Kurama though. He pivots sharply, sweeps a leg at Obito's feet, then flips over his head and slams bodily into Kisame, nails latching onto skin. Kisame yips! Swinging Sama'ada to bat him away, and Kurama goes low, flips the kunai Obito stabbed him with around in his hand, and slices a deep cut across the back of Kisame's leg as he moves. With a grunt of tightly controlled pain, Kisame goes down, even as he swings Sama'ada hard. About the only upside to a blade that big is the fact that it's easy to see coming. Kurama leaps up, too heavy and clumsy without the edge of chakra that's usually in all of his movements, but Naruto's muscle memory is good for something. He ducks his head, flips over the scaled sword, and lands on the balls of his feet as he spins to avoid Obito's flight of kunai. The Uchiha blurs out of sight, and without his ability to sense malice, Kurama can't say whether that motion was speed or kamui. He doesn't wait around to find out, but bolts for the door. There's no use staying to fight when he can just barely manage what a baseline human can. The damn seal on his chest needs to come off, and now! And then he'll turn right back around and pummel Obito into the ground! Except There's a gasp behind him as the water washes away and Kakashi surfaces, Kasame's broken jutsu leaving the floor where it should be again. He staggers upright, Aoba over one shoulder and an arm around Genma's waist, both of the Togojo limp in his grasp, and he's at the far end of the cavern with Obito and Kasame between him and the door. Maybe he can get out before they stop him, but since it's Obito, the chances are slim, at best. Sage, but living was so much easier before Kurama got infected with Naruto's scaring! He pivots in place just as Obito reappears, hatefully familiar Gunma in one hand, and it's mostly luck that the fan skims past his head, almost clipping his ear as it passes. With a curse, Kurama dives to the side, tries to grab for any wisp of chakra, any power at all, but there's nothing. There's not even a trace that he can feed to overpower the damn seal. Nothing to corrupt or change, just emptiness, and it's even more disconcerting than that first moment alone in his body after 100 years spent as a passenger. It really is a seal meant to hold a Bijou, and even if Obito didn't fully know what he was doing when he burned it into Kurama's skin, he's still a clever asshole with far too much luck. He grabs the chain as Obito hauls the Gunmai back, wraps it around his arm, and leaps to the side with a sharp wrench, and Obito moves a step. It's not much of a victory, but it shifts his feet, and Kurama dives beneath a warp of air that spits out kunai, slides feet first across the stone, and jerks the chain to make Obito stagger. Another step aborted and heavy, and Kakashi drops down behind Obito, flipping his tanto over and drives it into Obito's spine. About time. Kurama growls, rolling to his feet. He lunges sideways to grab the fan end of the Gunmai, flips it up like a shield, and catches the crash of Sama'ada's blade against it, gritting his teeth to keep from staggering. Obito snarls, dragging himself forward and off of the blade. The wound fills with white ooze that hardens into skin, healed in an instant, and he spins to face Kakashi with a laugh that's bordering on mad. "You missed!" he taunts. Kakashi eyes him. "No," he says mildly with only the barest edge of irritation. "I can safely say I hit what I was aiming for, and anyone else would have felt that." With a snort, Kurama shoves the Gunmai forward, all of his body weight behind it, and forces Kasame to give him room. He darts away from the next swing, rolls away from a water jutsu, but this isn't going to win them the fight. Kurama needs his chakra if he's going to have a chance against either one of them. It grates! Obito is right there. Won't have an easy exit if they can stop him from using fucking Kamui again, and even one Bijudama would be enough. Obito slides between Kurama and Kisame in a whirl of black cloak and fire sparks. Kurama curses and drops a massive gut of flames pouring over his head and grabs for Obito's ankle. It's not a shockwave, but it scores flesh, makes Obito leap back as Kurama comes to his feet, breathing hard. "What are you even doing here, you fucking bastard?" Kurama growls. "The Gedo Mazo is gone. Your plan failed." "A setback," Obito says coldly, calling the Gunmai back to him with a jerk of one wrist. "But I'm more interested in you, Uzumaki. The list of things that you shouldn't know keeps getting longer." Oh great. Just about the last thing Kurama wants is an interested criminal mastermind. He bares his teeth weighing options, but Kakashi is darting around Kisame to keep his attention, and no help is forthcoming from that side. "I'm nosy, what the fuck is it to you?" That gets him a low-fractured laugh threaded through with fury. "Absolutely nothing. This world is going to change whether you like it or not, Uzumaki. Are you sure you don't want to be on the right side?" Kurama growls, stopping dead as his hands curl into fists. "Right side? Do you even know what the hell this is all about, you moron?" Sharingan eyes narrow faintly. "The Eye of the Moon!" A laugh cracks out of Kurama, rough and derisive and full of loathing. "Screw you and your naivete. Screw Minora too while we're at it. That plan you're so devoted to is just a smoke screen. You're being used. Sage, you're the biggest pawn in this entire game. Madara set all of this up and Zetsu set him up. Have you really never noticed?" His step falters, but before Kurama can take advantage of the opening, he turns, facing Kurama squarely. "Explain," he growls. "Sage, this is the worst idea. But Kurama isn't Naruto. There's no way he could talk Obito around, even if he could perfectly create the circumstances of the last fight. No way to fight him to a halt without Kakashi's Kamui at full strength, and that's still 10 years away. But maybe Kurama can just give him another target. This is absolutely Kurama's dumbest idea ever, and he is going to blame Naruto from now until he dies, because clearly he's been infected! Kurama snorts, makes a show of rocking back on his heels like he couldn't care less about this conversation. What? Things in your life just happen like that? Madara just happens to rescue you from where you're buried under a ton of rocks. It just happens that the one time you can leave the cave, you're exactly in time to watch your best friend get murdered by your other friend. And here I thought you were good at that twisty thinking. Obito is completely still.
Kiri killed Ren,
He says flat and icy.
Kakashi killed Ren.
Those Kirinin were being controlled. Kurama counters, and he can almost see the cracks forming in Obito's facade.
It's entirely too satisfying.
Madara was controlling them, and Zetsu got you there just in time to see the trap. You were planning to go back to Konoha until then, weren't you? Too bad that didn't fit with Madara's plans. Rin died because Madara wanted you.
In retrospect, probably not the best wording he could have used.
The gunbai whips around almost too fast to follow, and Kurama leaps back but is not fast enough. He's slammed into the cavern wall hard enough to make his vision black out, collapses in a heap, and can't quite manage to get his feet under it before there's a whirling vortex of fire spilling into the air around him. Without chakra, there's no way to absorb it, and Kurama scrambles out of the way, head spinning and vision wavering. Blood trickles down the back of his neck, not healing, and he's too slow and clumsy. A hand with black painted nails catches him around the throat crushingly tight and slams him into the stone. Instantly, Kurama snarls, twists his body up, and kicks Obito in the face. Kurama! Kakashi shouts even as the Uchiha goes reeling back, and Kurama wheezes in a breath, turns and catches the tanto Kakashi throws to him. A vague salute is as much as he can manage in thanks, but Kakashi is focused on Kasame again, pulling out a kunai and whirling back. Kurama isn't a swordsman the way Sasuke is, or Kakashi is, but Kushina was, and he has echoes of those memories. Kata's performed day after day for all the years he was tied to her. He sets his feet, brings the blade up, and lunges after a flight of kunai, aiming for Obito's throat. The bastard turns intangible, and Kurama stumbles as he passes through, his form almost falling. Seiji hates Kamui! A duck and roll lets the gunbai's next pass whistle over his head, and Kurama twists, rolls, and brings the sword up as the fan comes down, the full force of Obito's weight behind it. The impact makes Kurama grunt, muscles straining as he tries to force it away, but he's at a disadvantage with angle and strength. Above him, crimson and black eyes are spinning, and Kurama wrenches his gaze away, closing his eyes.
How long do you think you can hold out?
Obito growls, and there's a note of savage satisfaction in it that makes it a taunt.
Until Kasame kills Kakashi. Until Sasori slips into the academy and takes those children you've been protecting so carefully. Until Konan frees Nagato and they level Konoha between them.
For one breathless, aching moment, Kurama's heart entirely ceases to beat. No. He snarls, but it's desperate, and he knows it. Leave them alone! Whatever pathetic plan you think you have!
Setsu!
Obito continues like he isn't even listening, and it sounds hateful in a way Kurama hasn't heard from him since he and Kakashi fought each other in the obsolete timeline.
He'll be watching. He's always watching. If anything that you're saying is true.
He doesn't finish the thought, but it's still enough to spark a flash of anger in Kurama's chest. And you really think I'm going to let you kidnap those kids? He growls. Screw you! I'm going to tear your damn throat out!
No,
Obito says.
You won't.
In an instant, the gunbai is gone. Strong hands grab Kurama's wrists even as he comes up ready to rip through flesh, jerk him sideways, and slam his bodily into the wall again, and Kurama grunts as all the air is forced from his lungs. He can feel something creeping over his legs, his arms, vines as thick around as his bicep, curling over him to hold him in place, and it gives him a flash of the freak squad facing him in the forest. Gives him a flash of Tenzo when Shisui's eyes turning crimson and Kurama's blood goes cold as he realizes what's about to happen. No! He snarls, trying to thrash away, but the Mogadon is too tight, unyielding. Kurama feels hands on his face, framing his eyes, and Obito's voice full of low, rough menace as he growls.
Open your eyes.
The terror is a mad thing, wild and desperate and strong enough to completely block out all sense. Kurama lunges forward, ready to bite Obito's throat out if he has no other options, but a hand fists in his hair and slams his head back against the stone with a harsh crack. The cry is torn from Kurama's throat, stars bursting into blinding brilliance against the darkness as pain explodes and his eyes fly open of their own volition. Red and black catches his gaze, spinning lazily, and the light in them is too bitter for triumph.
I'm going to save this world,
Obito says, quiet and full of aching, blistering fury.
and you're going to help me.
The world blurs, and the last thing Kurama hears before everything fades is Kakashi's desperate cry. Sage, is his last thought. Please. Not again.